Who are you, and what do you think you're doing here? No, seriously, who are you, and what are you doing here? I really want to know, and more importantly, I want you to know. Maybe you're like Pete. Pete's been coming to Mass since he could sit on his mother's lap. He's Catholic in his bones. Coming to Mass has entered every fiber of his being. For him, starting the week without Mass would be like starting a day without coffee. Maybe you're like Carl and Lupe, a young couple who were both raised in the church. Their families would come to Mass pretty regularly. They both received their sacraments. In fact, they met at the confirmation retreat. But once they got away to college, Mass wasn't able to compete with all the distractions that college and life offered. They would only go to Mass when they visited family or family visited them. During those times, they'd feel a twinge of guilt about not going to Mass more often. But they did make a point of getting married in the church because they knew it was important to their families. Oddly enough, it was important for Lupe too. Once their baby Carlito was born, they realized they wanted him to have the same foundation support that they had been given by the church. So they made a special effort to come to Mass on Sundays, even when Carlito can be a bit distracting for some people. Or maybe you're like Bobby Sue. Bobby Sue lived in a small town in Colorado. By the time she was in the second grade and her brother was in kindergarten, she'd lived in 3 different states and countless houses. She never felt safe or even like she was at home in any of these homes. One morning, her mom and dad were gone. She was the big sister. She'd been through this before, so she knew what to do. She fixed 2 bowls of Fruit Loops, turned on the cartoons and waited and waited. This time, her mom and dad didn't come back when the cartoons were over. A lady came over that afternoon and took Bobby Sue and her brother to a house that she'd never seen before. The lady said that this is going to be their new home. Now, at first, Bobby Sue was excited. She had her mom and dad, but it never felt like home to her. At least not the homes that she saw on TV or when she was with her Aunt Pauline. Maybe this house would be home. What Bobby Sue didn't know was that this was a foster home. Her mom had been sent to prison, and her dad didn't know how to take care of 2 kids. So she and her little brother stayed with different foster parents for about 2 years. Now, eventually her mom and dad did come by and pick them up. They told them they were going to a new home in Turlock, California. So maybe now she'd be home. But over the next 8 years, they lived in 6 more houses in Turlock, but not the home that they wished for. As kids, she, her brother, and her baby sister would go to church on a church bus. Now, at this church, she met lots of happy people. When she asked why they were so happy, she was told that they prayed a lot and read the Bible. But no matter how much she read the Bible, or how hard she prayed, she never felt like home. When her dad went to jail the same year she went to high school, she realized that she was going to have to find a home if she was going to be home. That she was going to have to leave this house if she was going to find home. So she left. And it worked. She met a nice young man who had a family that felt like Aunt Pauline's. When she asked why they were so happy, they said that they prayed, went to Mass, yes, they were Catholic, and that they tried to live by what they heard at Mass. Bobby Sue felt like she'd found home. In fact, she was sure of it when she was baptized into the Holy Rosary Church in Hillmore and became engaged to this young man who showed her the way. But about 6 months before the wedding, she was in a car accident. She was in a coma for 9 months before she passed away. At the funeral, the deacon told her story in just a few simple words. Bobby Sue was in the darkness, looking for light. She found the light, but fell back into darkness. Now she's been brought into the light again. Now she's home. She was my big sister. She knew what to do. It would take another 10 years, but she showed me the way home. So have you found your way home? In the Old Testament, we hear the story of Job. He lost everything, his home, his wealth, even his family. He couldn't understand how God would allow this to happen. Even in all that pain, he never doubted God. He just wanted to see and hear God. Do you long to see God? If so, you're right where you belong. The Constitution of the Sacred Liturgy reminds us that in every Mass, we are in the real presence of God. To be clear, that does not mean that we're reminded of God or that we see symbols of God, but we are in the real presence of God. Yes, in the Eucharist in a special way, but also in the priests when he celebrated the sacrament of Tutti Christi, in the scriptures when they were proclaimed from the ambo, and in the people when we work together, stand together, pray together. The word liturgy comes from the Greek word liturgia, which translates to work of the people. So again, who are you? And what do you think you're doing here? These questions are not meant to be rhetorical. You and your parents have already been asked these questions already by the church. When infants are baptized, parents are asked these questions on behalf of the children. What name do you give your child? And what do you ask of God's church? When adults enter the church through baptism, confirmation, communion, one of the first steps is the rite of acceptance. At this rite, the priest will go to them and ask, what is your name? Then he'll ask, what do you ask of the church? And then they'll follow up with, what will that bring to you? So this week I'm going to invite you to work through an exercise called the 5 whys. Take some time and answer the question of, what do you ask of God's church? Whatever your answer is, it's your answer, so it can't be wrong. Now ask the follow-up question. What would that bring you? Take that answer and ask yourself, why is that important to you? Try this cycle 5 times until you get to the core whys. Now for most people, the first answer will come from the head. It will seem logical and maybe religious enough to be satisfying. When you follow up with, what will that bring you? Your answer will probably be more from the heart. Not so much an answer, but maybe a longing. Maybe you thought about the guilt of not going to Mass wasn't so much about guilt as it was about being homesick. Regardless, take note of the answers that come from your head and from your heart. Both are important. Maybe it will be a head answer that will bring you to Mass 1 week, or a heart answer on another week. Besides, you can't really separate the two. No matter where my heart goes, my head comes along for the ride. No matter where my head is, my heart's there too. I guess they just take turns driving. I guess my body's just there for transportation. And I got to tell you, after this week, I've learned that if the body's not going, nobody's going. So again, who are you and what do you think you're going to be doing here? Oh, and welcome home.